Okay, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the special council meeting of Monday, August the 10th at 5 p.m. I'd like to make a quick acknowledgement that we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. Tonight, we're gathered to cover off three items. Bylaw 984-20, correspondence that I received from the mayor of Leduc County, and a closed session about some development opportunities. So I'd like to get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Councillor Hendricks?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Unanimously. And so without further ado, we'll get into Bylaw 984-20, temporary face coverings. Second and third reading. Ms. Bowman, I think you're up.
I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, great, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council, and the public. In an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19, many jurisdictions across Canada and in our region have considered introducing mandatory face coverings in public places. Tonight's presentation will provide information supporting Beaumont administration's recommended response to mandatory face coverings. On July 30th, Council gave first reading to Bylaw 984-20, temporary face covering bylaw, and directed administration to review mandatory face coverings in all public places. Administration subsequently engaged directly with 107 local businesses, reviewed the latest research and health organization recommendations, and considered the public interest of responding to COVID-19 in Beaumont. In addition to the review undertaken by administration, the context surrounding mandatory face coverings has evolved rapidly. The province has now mandated masks at school for staff and students in grades 4 to 12. The regional approach to mandatory face coverings has not been uniform. Edmonton and St. Albert now require face coverings in all indoor public places. Some municipalities have mandated face coverings in certain public places. 3 municipalities have established triggers for mandatory face coverings in all public places, and some municipalities like the City of Leduc are still considering their response to all mandatory face coverings in all indoor public places. Research shows that when combined with measures such as physical distancing, regular hand washing, and isolating when sick, face coverings in public can be an effective tool to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Research has now been able to discredit common misconceptions around face coverings. Research shows that, for example, wearing a face covering encourages social distancing, does not increase the amount of carbon dioxide an individual breathes in, and does not weaken the immune system. Early research of the effectiveness of face coverings was not conclusive. However, more research has led to international, national, and provincial health organizations and leaders to recommend face coverings be worn in public places. The World Health Organization, Centers for Disease Control, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and Dr. Dina Hinshaw, Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health, all recommend people wear face coverings in public. Administration contacted 107 of 167 local businesses in the community that are accessible to the public. 78% of respondents support mandatory face coverings. 18% did not support mandatory face coverings, and 4% of businesses indicated they were indifferent or would maybe support mandatory face coverings. 85% of businesses felt a bylaw would encourage people to wear face coverings while visiting their business. It is important to acknowledge that many held strong preferences regarding mandatory face coverings. The Chamber of Commerce also conducted a survey that was available online. The results vary from the city's survey conducted of local businesses. Beaumont administration was not involved in creating or administering the survey. It was not clear whether IP addresses were tracked to ensure unique responses and responses from local stakeholders. Administration is not able to speak to the reliability of the data or conclusions drawn. Administration did review the comments submitted through the survey and believe many of the concerns identified have been addressed through the proposed bylaw, exemptions, research, and the enforcement method proposed. The evolving context and administration's review has led administration to recommend council pass a bylaw mandating face coverings in all indoor public places rather than only on transit or municipal buildings. This would place Beaumont within option 4 of our decision matrix, which is shown by the yellow star on the screen. The following provides some rationale for the recommendation. New research shows that face coverings are an effective tool and are not harmful. Face coverings add additional protection against the spread of COVID-19. Proactively mandating face coverings may help keep Beaumont open and encourage members of our community to feel more comfortable accessing services. Administration determined there was strong support from businesses in our city. Administration concluded that it is in the public interest to strive for zero public COVID-19 cases in Beaumont. There is no safe level of COVID-19 cases in the population. An evidence-based model to establish the number of COVID-19 cases that should trigger mandatory face coverings in the community is not available at this time. And removing the distinction between municipal buildings and other public places is more straightforward for the public. It also brings Beaumont in alignment with Edmonton, our largest neighboring municipality. The proposed bylaw includes exemptions for those who are unable to safely wear face coverings, such as young children or those with medical contradictions. The term face covering is used to provide the public with flexibility and simply means any barrier that covers the mouth, nose, and chin. Non-medical masks are currently available in many locations in our community for purchase or free of charge. Although the proposed bylaw does outline fines for extenuating circumstances, the city will take an education-first approach to enforcement. Business owners will not be expected to enforce the bylaw. The city will launch a public awareness and education component. We ask the public to respect the privacy of others. Please do not confront anyone who is not wearing a mask or inquire about any medical condition or disability. The bylaw is temporary. It is proposed to be in effect starting August 14th, 2020 until October 31st, 2020, and requires a council amendment to extend. In addition, administration will return to council on August 25th with information regarding a potential incentive program to encourage compliance and bring the community together during these difficult times. In closing, Beaumont administration is proposing mandatory face coverings be considered a pragmatic and proactive response to ensure the health and safety of others in the community. City is asking the public to continue to take measures to protect one another as we respond to the COVID-19 pandemic together. This concludes my presentation. Administration is happy to take any questions council may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation this evening. It was really well done, and the attachments in our agenda were really well thought out. I really appreciate that. Just before we get going, I'd just like to make a couple of acknowledgements. One is this is a really emotional issue. And we've heard from a lot of people in our community and about. For me, it's been almost a pretty even split between people that are really for it and those that are against. And my experience has been that those that are against are really against it. But it is a public health issue, and it would have been nice if the province had come up with some guidance. And so one of the things I got thinking about tonight was, and we'll talk about it after second reading, is perhaps maybe we should be sending this bylaw to public health to get a quick review to see whether or not this is a truly proportional and good move on our behalf as a municipality. As of 3:30 today, we have 2 active cases in Beaumont, which is what we're dealing with. And as we've seen, I don't know if the rest of council has been following, but there's been a wide range of, as mentioned before, a wide range of responses from various municipalities. Some are putting triggers in, some are mandating masks in outdoor spaces, some have gone the full way. So we're running the full gamut. There's not a whole lot of things that we can do. But one thing that really became clear over the last week is with Dr. Hinshaw and her team mandating masks in schools, heavily, what do you call, I apologize. Dr. Hinshaw heavily mandating or recommending that masks be worn. Masks are becoming a more and more recognized way to stop COVID. So as we open it up to questions, we'll open up to questions for members of council, and then we'll see where we go. Do members of council have questions for admin on this bylaw? Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Ms. Broom or administration in general. Could you just amplify a little bit more about why we rejected the trigger approach to mandating face masks in public places?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Stout, there isn't an evidence-based model to base a trigger on that administration could rely on. The province does have 10 cases as the threshold for putting us into what they call a watch category for their relaunch. But there isn't necessarily correlation between that and safe levels of COVID-19 in the community, or what might trigger what you would call an outbreak. So in the absence of an evidence-based model, administration decided that it wasn't in the public interest to go that route.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, essentially this is because we don't know what that triggering level would be. We might already be at it, or we might set a level that we're never going to reach, in which case it's never triggered. We just don't know where it should be. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Stout, that's a fair assessment.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the response.
Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. I just wonder if you can elaborate a little bit more on the business conversations that you had. What was the biggest concern? So you approached them with a yes or no, but I'm assuming you had some narrative as well. What was the biggest concern that you heard from businesses? Are you able to summarize what that might have been?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Van Newkirk, I think that one of the biggest concerns was whether they would need to enforce the bylaw, and administration has presented that will not be an expectation of business owners. There were some comments around questions whether young people would be exempt, whether people with health conditions or contradictions would be exempt. So a lot of the concerns that were brought forward, we believe addressed in the bylaw.
Follow up, Your Worship. Yeah, thank you. Just following up to that, did you hear anything about a desire for consistency? A desire for there to be one set of rules as to avoid businesses who were in support of having face coverings, not being chastised for that or punished, on social media or on, by any other repercussions that could have come. Did you hear any of those types of conversations?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Van Newkirk, if I could ask Rob to maybe further elaborate, or maybe Wendy, if she would be willing. Jones.
Mr. Mackin?
Hello?
Yeah, your sound is not doing well.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Van Newkirk, in my discussion with
Our apologies, council.
there we go.
No, I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted, but you're not on video.
No, they can't hear me. Council?
We can hear you. We can't see you.
Something's wrong.
So you're but you want to go to the boardroom. Go to the boardroom. Eleanor's in there.
Mayor, we can table that question for a moment while they get sorted if you like. It's up to you.
Yeah, no, fair enough. We'll move on for a second. You got a follow up to that one? And then we'll come back.
No, that's good for now. Thank you. Oh, there's Mr. Mackin.
I see Mr. Mackin popped up.
Apologies, council.
Go ahead.
Back to this specific question. No, we didn't hear any concerns directly around that.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now, your worship.
Thank you. Councillor Hendricks. You
You're
gotta
on
unmute
mute.
yourself, Councillor.
Sure, it was a great point, but you're on mute.
Didn't hear
There
a
now.
word.
Good stuff.
How's
Hey,
that?
my question to administration is, we have a process to get ourselves into masks. What is the process to get ourselves out of masks?
Through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, the bylaw is a temporary bylaw, so it will only be in effect until October 31st, 2020. You would need a council resolution to extend that period. And as with any bylaw, council would have an opportunity to rescind the bylaw at any time if the context changed, if things changed, and council felt that that was warranted.
Okay, so supplemental to that, then, what would change it? What would give us an answer to removing the mask bylaw would be a trigger. Something would trigger that decision. That's why I'm wondering why we don't have one going in and why we wouldn't have one going out.
So through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, is your question what trigger would be appropriate?
No. Yeah, what I've heard and very well put was that there's a process that doesn't allow us to create a trigger mechanism for these masks. You're suggesting that there is no way scientifically to create a trigger to start the mask process.
Mhm.
But for us to get out of it, we need something that'll tell us we can exit at some point. So the same argument would be at the other end. There will never be a trigger that will allow us to get out of masks, given that there's no trigger to get us into masks.
So through your worship to Councillor Hendricks, thank you for the question. So I think that right now we're bringing this forward because the World Health Organization has declared a pandemic. If that were to change, then we would certainly be looking at all of the health measures that are currently in place.
Well, appreciate the update on what the World Health Organization has done. I think I've been fully saturated with what they're doing and all the information we've had on COVID. So appreciate the update. But my point is that if we're going to get into masks, we also got to have a way to get out. This can't be for the next 2 to 3 years, waiting for a vaccine or something. That's why I'm suggesting an exit strategy has to be in place here, not just another council meeting where we're having the same conversation. Or are we waiting for the World Health Organization to tell us that this pandemic has been cleansed and we no longer have a problem? At that point, you'll suggest that masks are no longer a requirement.
Ms. Mohammed, yes, I saw you're waving your hand.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through to Councillor Hendricks. I think at this point we don't know what the exact end is here. So that's why we've made it this temporary bylaw that will take us through October, and we'll have to reevaluate then of whether the masks continue or not. There's any number of scenarios that can come around. Say the province does mandate it for the whole province, we wouldn't need the bylaw anymore. We could rescind it for that. Even if there were a vaccine, we'd still have to wait quite a bit of time before the population gets vaccinated against it. So even between 2 weeks ago and where we are today, the context keeps changing so much. For us to even at this point try and guess what that end final trigger, I don't think anyone quite knows what that is yet. So by making the bylaw temporary, it gives us that opportunity to revisit, and we likely will have different information at the end of October, and we'll have to determine where to go from there.
Follow up?
No, I just want to make the point, and I understand administration's comment about the World Health Organization. I get it. But my point is that we as council has now been put into a position here to make a call. And we're told that we have to follow the scientific evidence and that there is no triggers that will allow us to move forward one way or the other or exit. So you know, that puts us in a really tough spot.
Yeah.
And really it's the province's mandate. They should be looking after this. It's not our call. So
Yeah.
hence the problem. And I think my comment was a fair comment and it was a fair question.
Yeah, no.
Exiting, entrance and exit. You come in, you got to leave at some point. And this can't be sitting here for the next 48 months waiting for some magic trigger that tells us we can actually get out of this. So.
No, I agree. I think Beaumont has been very successful by following the current public health guidelines to keep our numbers down low. And so I'm struggling with this one today, I'll tell you. Councillor Monkoff-Swain.
Yes, thanks. And a really important question, Councillor Hendricks. For me, I think it's pretty straightforward. None of us are medical professionals on here. And so I look to the top doctor here in the province. Right now, she's saying, recommending that we can't socially distance, wear a mask, right? So the trigger for me would be when she turns around, or the top doctor, whoever that may be, who changes that direction. That would be it for me. That would trigger it. I like the fact that we've got a review at the end of October, but to the point that Ms. Mohammed made, if something changes prior to then, we'll obviously jump on board and rescind that. But I look to the doctor. She's saying wear masks when you can't socially distance, and so that's why I think it's important now. Until the time she says we can't, that would be the trigger for me.
Fair enough. Councillor Hendricks.
So my question is, and I'm with this whole process, and I get it, and I get what she's saying. Why hasn't she just made the next level of requirement, which is make it mandatory? Why is she not? I get all the nuances about it's a good idea, you should, but we're taking that you should to another level. Why isn't she? Why didn't she? She should have, I think. Now you've got this patchwork, just in our region, the patchwork of different situations. I was talking to some people that were just shopping in Camrose who say it's completely different there again in terms of process. You need a handbook to drive from Edmonton to Calgary and stop in all the communities to find out what the rules are. That just can't be the way. This is exactly what happened when the smoking bylaw first became real, and every community had its own little shot at it. Then finally the province said, no, we got to make one. We can't just have everybody with their own style and type. Same with these masks. Why are they not just stepping up and saying, listen, if this is sound advice, and it sounds like it is, then make it mandatory. But no, they haven't gone that far. I don't understand why not. So.
Well, fair enough. Sounds like we're straying into debate. And so before we do that, we'll throw a motion on the table so we actually have something to debate. Does anybody have any more questions for administration on what they're proposing? Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Just a quick clarification point. I know the answer, we'll make sure our friends at home listening. The proposed bylaw attachment 2 says in public vehicles. So social media has its own way of interpreting things. So people are suggesting that there could be private vehicles that are considered mass mandatory, but we're talking here about public vehicles being Beaumont Transit, and I'm assuming Beaumont owned vehicles for our staff. Is that correct? Just for clarification point, please.
Through your worship to Councillor Daniluk, thank you for the question. So a public vehicle in the bylaw is defined as transit, you're correct. It would include any vehicle where a public pays a fee for transportation. So it should include things like taxis or Uber. Would not include private vehicles if you're driving your friends or family members. And it does also include vehicles for city staff.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Stout. Questions?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I appreciate all of this information. It is a mind-boggling task right now, for sure. When I think about the smoking bylaws, that took years and years. This is happening very quickly, relatively speaking. But my question to Ms. Brome is around the business survey that the city of Beaumont conducted. And we get very different results when we look at that. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to the methodology that was used for the business survey that the city conducted, and fill us in on that, please.
Through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, thank you for the question. So the city contacted businesses by phone. We do have a list of 167 businesses in the community that are accessible by public. We got responses from 100. And when we contacted businesses, we asked to speak to the business owner or a representative who could speak on authority for the business. I think that provides all the information, but maybe I'll see if there's a follow-up question.
Sorry, no real follow-up question other than to say it was a very different methodology, and I think the city could verify the answers from each one of the participants. That's essentially the difference. Thank you.
All right. Very much. Councillor Stout, question of admin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'm never sure sometimes whether I'm asking a question or whether I'm debating, but I'm going to go ahead and you can tell me if this is a question or a debate. So when we did first reading and we had the discussion there, I raised the issue of whether or not we should have a fine for for an infringement of the bylaw, and there was some discussion over whether if a bylaw had to include a fine or not, and what enforcement difficulties that may or may not produce. I noticed that in the request for decision that is addressed. There is some discussion of that, and for which my thanks for including that. I appreciate that. And arising from that question then really was and this is the bit you can tell me whether it's debate or not, is how do we arrive at a fine of, in this case, $50? I noticed reading through the other municipalities that the fines vary from $100, $200 in one case, I think $150. I'm pleased to see that we're towards the bottom of that spectrum, but I'm curious to know why it's $50 and not some other amount.
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, if I could ask Director Cook to answer that question.
Good afternoon, Council, and through your worship to Councillor Stout. I'll do my best to address your question. You are correct. We are very much at the bottom end of the fine spectrum, so to speak, with respect to our neighboring municipalities, as $50 for a violation, not only the first but subsequent violations, is in our bylaw. Some bylaws actually have an increase on second violations. The City of Beaumont will be taking a proactive approach with our residents. By no means is this an opportunity for the City of Beaumont to come out heavy-handed, to use that term. However, we want to take a proactive approach in educating our residents on the benefits of using masks. In addition to that, too, any opportunity to engage our residents in that manner may be communicated as well. The City of Beaumont currently right now is exploring opportunities to engage our residents to promote using masks so that we may use those benefits and other community endeavors. Rob Mackin, our Director of Economic Development, may chime in here in just a second to tell a little bit more about that. I can assure you, City of Beaumont Municipal Enforcement and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police do not have the intent of going out and issuing a violation ticket on a first offense. However, it is at the officer's discretion. Those officers, our officers, have been advised, like others, that we use a proactive approach. I'm going to see if Director Rob Mackin would like to just add on our proactive avenues to promoting mask wearing.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Cook. So we are investigating a number of options around, you can call it incenting people to wear the masks, but more importantly, making it a positive exercise so that there's an opportunity to educate along the way. We're looking at how other communities have done it. We're also looking at what might be a bit more Beaumont specific. So that is something that is top of mind. We've had great feedback and response through our social media campaigns with COVID, and that might be the avenue that we would focus on as well to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. That still doesn't get me to a $50 sum. I appreciate all that you've said, and I think all of that is important, and I support it, and particularly support as Chief Cook referred to, not taking the heavy-handed approach and focusing on education and persuasion rather than slapping people with the fine at the first opportunity, which I certainly don't want to see. So that's all good. I'm just curious to know what the right amount is. The RFB, excuse me, the RFD briefing refers to the same things and refers as well to having a process, to being able to go through each of these steps as part of an escalation and having a process, and including issuing a ticket and having a fine, which is so that we have an escalation when enforcing this, all of which again is important, recognize the need for that. But then if the fine can still, which is why you might not want to have a bylaw that does not include a fine. I said that the wrong way around, which is why we're having a bylaw that does include a fine, all of which I can see the sense of and will support. My question really comes down to what's the right amount for the fine. If you need to have a fine just for purely nominal enforcement purposes, then we could have a fine of $1 or something, and still go through the same exercise and still have an escalation process that results in the writing of a ticket and all that's, and the legal process that's associated with that. I'm just curious to know how we decide what the fine is. Although, yes, I'll reiterate, I'm happy that it's towards the lower end. And my concern here really is that this still comes down to a recommendation in the end, that we're asking people to do this, and we believe that it's for the safety of the community as a whole, but it is still a recommendation. The science is certainly incomplete and ever changing. So this is what we believe you should do to the best of our understanding and knowledge. But if you don't do it, I'm going to fine you and take money off you. And so if I'm going there based on an approach of this is a recommended thing, we think this is a benefit, then I feel that fine should be absolutely nominal and small.
Okay, we can debate the size of the fine when we get the bylaw on the table.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I will take that under advisement. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Daniluk, question?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Mayor Stewart. Just to Mr. Brome or Mr. Mackin, it's fair to say that since COVID began, businesses in Alberta have been hit pretty hard, and here in Beaumont is no exception to that. In your responses from businesses regarding the mandatory mask idea, did those businesses feel that it would hinder their businesses if masks were made mandatory? I'm asking because I visited business the last couple of weeks that we all have on council doing business here in Beaumont, and virtually all the staff are wearing masks in those businesses already. So do they feel as business owners that a mandatory mask bylaw would infringe or hamper their business going forward, please? And your thoughts on the response you got from the businesses, please?
Through your worship to Councillor Daniluk, thank you for the question. I'll let Rob jump in on this question if he's able to.
So through your worship to Councillor Daniluk, yes, our businesses definitely are taking it day by day through the situation, and the masks is just one of the major parts of it. What we did hear from our businesses, though, is there's a sense of security. At least they know when customers do have the masks coming in, and for their own employees' protection as well. I would probably hesitate to say there was a hard one way or the other, but it was a sense of, you know what, by doing this, we can put further protections in and ensure. And in some ways, the comment around, let's just make sure we keep everyone open, because if it does slide downhill, I think we saw during the shutdown how devastating it can be. So fortunately, we turned that corner. We don't want to have that situation again. Or through some of our surveys we had throughout COVID, we know that if a full second wave hit our community, the businesses would be hit significantly harder than even the initial one.
Right. Thank you very much. That's what I anticipated, but wanted to clarify for our listeners. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. All right, seeing no further requests to speak, I will move that we put, I will move bylaw 984-20 temporary face coverings. Option 4 is recommended in attachment 1. I will move second reading, but I'm going to propose 3 amendments to it as well. First amendment being that the end date not be October 31st, but December 31st, 2020. Second motion being, I strongly believe we need trigger points. So the first one would be that mandatory masks to come into effect when AHS puts us on the watch list. And I strongly agree with Councillor Hendricks that we got to have an exit point. And so that mandatory masks come off when we come off that watch list. And I'm confident in putting those 3 amendments out there. I'm confident in moving the end date to December 30th or December 31, 2020, because we have those entry and exit points. We'll get to debate in a second, Councillor. Confident we have those entry and exit points, but I am not confident because we only have 2 cases. And for the longest time, we've had 0 cases. And the public health guidelines have worked really, really well. And I just can't wrap my head around mandating masks in Beaumont right now with case counts the way they are. I mean, we've never made the watch list. And so I'm going to propose those 3 amendments as proposed and open it up to debate. Councillor Stout.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I did not hear any of amendment number 1. You were chopping out. Would you repeat it for me, please?
Apologize for that. Yeah, no, I just, the current end date without an extension is October 31. And with 2 trigger points on masks in and masks out, I'm more comfortable not putting the end date out closer to the end of the year versus October 31, which is essentially 2 months from now, and then have the same discussion all over again. So any further questions on the amendments proposed, Councillor?
So you're proposing the end date be December 31st?
Correct. I see Ms. Mohammed's hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. For ease of moving through this debate, I would suggest that you vote on each amendment separately. Just a recommendation, so you can move through it. You've got 3 different items there, and if you put them all in one, it might get very complicated in terms of how you debate and discuss this. Just a recommendation.
Let me think about it for a second. Sure, let's do that. So let's vote on. Does council want to have a debate on the amendments or the bylaw as a whole with the amendments in? I think we'll just debate the bylaw as a whole with the amendments in. I see some nodding heads, and then we'll just keep track of it as we go. So once again, open it up for debate for members of council. Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. I need clarification. Are you suggesting that the bylaw is not triggered to start until we're put on the watch list?
I don't know if triggered to start, but mandatory masks not be triggered to start until we're put on the watch list. Ms. Bro?
Through you, Your Worship, if I could ask a question of clarification.
Sorry, you broke up a bit there.
Oh, sorry. Through you, Your Worship, would I be able to ask a question for clarification?
Sure.
Would the intent be for the bylaw to come into effect for municipal facilities and transit immediately, and then a second phased approach based on the trigger would bring us into mandatory face coverings for all indoor public places?
Trying to remember the bylaw. Right now, my intention would be that it comes into effect for transit because that's a consistent transit approach. But I don't see much difference between city-owned buildings and public spaces, but we could debate that too. I think it would all come into effect at the same time. Does that answer your question?
Could I have a follow-up?
Sure.
I'm sorry to be, maybe I'm just being dense here, but if the trigger is to be put, to take us off, is we're on the mandatory watch list, the province's watch list, then why would we not start it until we're on the watch list? That's the part I'm not following the logic.
Well, that's the intention. We would start when we're on the watch list, and we would come off when we're off the watch list because the province does a calculation. So right now, and the reason I've chosen the watch list is because right now our cases are low. They're running non-existent. When we get put on the watch list, that's when Alberta Health Services comes down and starts to talk to us about implementing more measures. And if it escalates even higher than that, they're going to come down and they're going to impose measures in our community. And so with their 50-50 split running in opposition and for masking bylaws, this seems to be a logical spot to sort of saw it off. If people don't want to wear the mask, then let's not get on the watch list. If we get to the point where we start to have to implement other measures to bring case counts down, it seems to be a good spot to do it. And it leaves the calculation about when your municipality is sort of in trouble into the hands of AHS rather than us trying to pick a number out of thin air. So if they change their algorithm on what puts you on a watch list, then the algorithm changes. I know other municipalities around us have picked solid numbers, and I don't know how they pick those triggers. So I'm really much trying to stay in line with Alberta Health Services and their guidelines. I do know that once we hit that watch list, they're going to start coming down and talking to us about things we need to be doing to start bringing those case counts down. And this seems to be a logical step. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
It does. I appreciate it. I am not on the same page as you right now, but I will continue to listen to what others are saying. Thank you.
Councillor Daniluk, followed by Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't mean to belate the point, but can you clarify, are we going to vote on each amendment individually, then back to the bylaw? I hope we're doing that, as my understanding. Could you clarify what you meant there in case I didn't hear it correctly, please? I'm anticipating we'll vote on each of the 3 amendments individually. Is that what you're looking at doing?
No, I moved the bylaw with the 3 amendments already intact. So we're motion. So if you want to remove one, then
okay, can I ask a follow-up question then, please, if you don't mind? So just to be clear, with these 3 amendments lumped together with the motion together, should the motion be declined or defeated, it stops there. Is that correct? There's no third reading, obviously, and the bylaw is not brought forward for how many more months after that?
Well, that'd be correct, but I'm hoping that through debate and discussion, if we need to make further amendments to the bylaw, or if council's will is that I remove a couple of amendments, that we get to that point through discussion and debate, that we get to something that we can all support.
That's what I thought. We have a chance to discuss this and see how it goes individual. Okay, so thanks for clarifying. Well, I'll look forward to debating this momentarily. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Munkoff-Swain, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thanks. And I think part of the reason, Your Worship, why you wanted to discuss this, because depending on the outcome of your second and third motions impacts the first one, right? Whether you're comfortable with December or not. So I get the challenge that you're going through. I'll address the trigger point as respectfully as I can. I couldn't be more opposed to a trigger. I quite frankly think you either think masks help the community or they don't. And so that should be the vote. If we wait until there is a problem, then we're too late. So triggers to me never made sense. And to be clear, that the provincial guidelines right now, again, Dr. Henshaw is saying wear a mask when you can't be socially distant there. They're not saying wait until you get 10 cases and become on the watch list before you have to wear a mask. I get the watch list and what they're doing, but that's an administrative piece to talk to us. But again, personally, I couldn't disagree more with a trigger number, whatever the number is. If we wait until it's a problem in our community, it's too late. The spread is gone. And again, I'll just reiterate the point that we're not testing everyone every day. And so only the number of cases that is determined on the amount of people who get tested. We've got kids going back into school. A lot more people are heading back into the workforce. And so, yeah, we need to, if you think masks are valid, that's a whole other conversation. But a trigger point to me just makes absolutely no sense. So that's my respectful, hopefully, 2 cents.
Fair enough. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Much similar to my comments that I made in our previous meeting, I'm not there with triggers either. I look at the triggers as, you're already out of the gate and you've got a problem, and now you're trying to contain it and do something about it. So, the gate is the gate is closed and locked for a reason. And when you look at masks, what the question that we're talking about is, the masks being mandatory or not, and and where they're going to be mandatory. The conversation around when is what's popping up now, because we're talking about how I respect Councillor Hendricks's initial comments about, okay, there's triggers to get in, but what about the triggers to get out? I get that and I see that, but similar to what I said in the first meeting, I don't really want to be sitting there waiting and checking off cases in Beaumont and waiting for numerical triggers to put a mandatory mask bylaw in. We're in my view, it may sound alarmist, but you're gambling with people's lives at that point, and you don't know who's affected or who is more susceptible, whether it's a grandma, a grandpa, an aunt, an uncle, a brother, or a sister, with all the underlying health conditions that exist in our world right now. Just not a risk that I'm willing to take right now as a councillor. So that's where I'm at on the triggers. I'll open up to other people's comments right now. Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Danlock. You're on mute, Councillor.
Your Worship, with respect to the word triggers, the word triggers has been brought to us by others, not by this council. The word triggers has come through the province. The word triggers have come through the federal government. Everything they've done has been based on some science-based trigger. Everything, right from the word of phasing, from lockdown, their decisions to slowly take us out of a complete lockdown to phase 1, phase 2, and there was some talk about phase 3. And we've seen various provinces rolling into other phases because of, quote, triggers. That's where the word triggers come from. The reason we're talking about mandatory masks today is because there seems to have been a ripple effect from our friends in Toronto that found its way to Calgary, then it found its way to Edmonton, and now it's found its way into our region. And now the situation that we have, which really hasn't changed since March, is now at a point where we have to make a decision on putting, a mandatory mask bylaw in place, which is unfortunate. Yes, there are risks. Do we got any way to cleanse all the risks? The answer is no. We absolutely need some kind of device that says, okay, this is the tolerant piece of our risk. And that's how all the other government levels have been making decisions on our behalf. When we make decisions on behalf of our residents, we have to have something that tells us where we are. If it's strictly, okay, well, wear a mask from now till whenever, that's not a risk adverse approach. That's just, I'm just not going to take it. We're just going to wear masks, and that's the end of it. We have to have something more than that. Otherwise, the province can see that we had to unlock some of the doors here, because otherwise the economy would grind into a whole other issue. We are also having unintended consequences with the current situation. And there's all kinds of mental health issues and all sorts of other things that are ringing true as a result of this problem. So it's a very complex matrix. It's not that simple. And we've seen it in the emails. We've seen some very, very tough emails about the downside of wearing masks, and not strictly from the science piece, but the mental health piece and everything else that goes with it. I get all that. So I think we have to be somewhere that the people can see that, yeah, this is the value matrix. This is how they established how they went in, and this is how they're establishing how they're going to get out, just like every other level of government has done. And I see no harm in that. So that's my point about, as they call it, the triggers. So.
Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, Don't think I'd support a trigger either. To me, putting in a threshold at which we suddenly say, "Oh, face coverings are now necessary," is bolting the stable door, or sorry, closing the stable door after the horse is bolted. I think it's, you know, I find myself in the unusual position of agreeing with Councillor Munkoff's right. Either we support face masks as a method of reducing community spread of COVID-19, or we don't, in which case we need to take some action before we reach any of those thresholds. I'm looking back at the RFD. I noticed, I'm going to quote you something, and my apologies if you are already completely familiar with this. Randomized serological testing done by the province indicates that more people were infected with COVID-19 than have been officially recorded. If accurate, serology testing indicates only approximately 17% of all the COVID-19 cases in the province were identified through swab testing as of mid-May. So 17% is about a sixth. If that's true in Beaumont, then the 2 cases really mean that there are another 10 people running around without any symptoms who are actually infected. If we wait then for the threshold to rise to whatever the number was that puts us on a watch list, was it 10? Then that would mean potentially that 50 asymptomatic people were unaware that they had COVID-19, but potentially infectious. And at that point, that means that if we don't stop each of them spreading to at least one other person, then we've got an outbreak, basically. And that's much more difficult to do with 50 people than it would be with 10 or 12. So no, I think if you wait that long, you've missed the opportunity to do anything about it. If the argument is that face masks are not effective in preventing it, then it's moot anyway, because it doesn't make any difference. So I'm not in favor of waiting for some level of infection to occur before we mandate face masks. No, if we're going to mandate face masks.
Well, therein lies the question, because well, I see 3 councillors not supporting triggers. Like, I won't support a bylaw at this point, because the science, I won't support the bylaw without the triggers, because right now the science doesn't indicate that we have a problem. And I get that we want to be seen as proactive and we want to try to keep it down to 0, but is 0 cases of COVID in our community a realistic expectation? I mean, you look at Brooks, they went from 3 to 1,000 in a week based on whatnot. But everybody in Beaumont has so far been very successful at maintaining the 2 meters distance, washing their hands, and following the other public health guidelines. And so do we need to, at this point, institute a mask bylaw, a mandatory mask bylaw, to achieve these low rates that we have? And I would argue that the answer to that question is no. So if we want to be proactive, the triggers make us proactive. Otherwise, the answer is no, and we should be debating this once we get enough cases that we have to put in other measures. And that's where I'm at with this. So, Councillor Danlock, you're up.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I do appreciate what you're trying to achieve here, but I will side on the side of no triggers. Using Councillor Hendrick's earlier comments about the exit from the program at the later time, the bylaw, pardon me. I understand where he was coming from. I prefer to have some way of measuring when it's time to get out. But based on administration's answers, I think it's difficult to decide when to get in and tough when to decide to get out. So if we accept that argument, then there's no need to have triggers on the bylaw. It's either you have masks or you don't. I'm not saying I'm in favor of the bylaw just yet, but to this point in the situation where we're at now with the amendment in front of us, I'm not comfortable tying triggers to this bylaw at this time. So I guess that kind of gives you a fourth person on the negative side. I do appreciate what you're trying to accomplish, but I'm not there on the triggers at this point, please. Thank you.
Councillor Barnhart, comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to be clear that I am not in favor of the triggers. I wasn't sure when you were counting 3, if you counted me in there as well. And I would just add to what's already been said that prevention is the side that I want to be on. And I think the horse has left the barn. The schools are reopening. To me, that's a trigger. Schools are reopening with mandatory masks being worn. I think the province hasn't done everything they should have done for sure, but they have mandated mask wearing in the schools. And I think in light of why we make bylaws, we make them to protect our society and look after the collective. And I think this is what we have to do right now. So I'm in favor of the bylaw as it is, without the triggers. And I'm not sure about your other two amendments. I need to know more about them before speaking to those. Thank you.
Well, I can read the room. I am going to withdraw all three of the amendments because I'm not comfortable with extending it to December 31st if we don't have ways in and way out. And I can see 5 councillors lining up against triggers. So I withdraw those amendments and put bylaw 984-20 as presented in attachment 1, option 4, the recommended one by administration. So I'll withdraw those and we can continue to debate the bylaw as written and without the amendments. Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Good discussion so far. I have to admit, when you say things like science doesn't indicate there's a problem, I'm not sure where you get that from. Dr. Henshaw clearly says there is a problem and you should wear a mask. So I'm not sure where that comes from. But well, anyway, I think
it comes from the fact that she won't actually mandate it. So
well, it's not, she can't, right?
Active cases.
The province does. Like she doesn't do that. Yes, her job is to give advice, right? So I get we're all frustrated with the decision should have been made, but that's a provincial political decision, and we're making kids wear masks. They don't vote, but the rest of us do. I won't go any further down that road. What I will say though is I do like I want to get to a place where we give the community a bit more direction, because I fully get where Councillor Hendricks is coming from, and you as well, Mayor Stewart, about we don't just want to have this bylaw out there. So, is there a way, not a trigger in terms of number of cases, but somewhere in there we can indicate that as soon as the chief medical officer in Alberta is recommending not to go with face masks, then that could be a trigger, for lack of a better term, for our community to know that. Right now we're following the advice. Everyone wants us to follow the advice of the health officials. The top doctor, we'll look at it again in October 31st. If before then, if she comes back out and says, actually now we're good and we're not recommending masks, then maybe that could be a bit more clarity. And until then, we'll review it on the 31st. So that clearly points that our decision, our thinking is based on the recommendation of the chief medical officer here. I'll just throw that out there.
Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to make 2 points. I won't really reiterate that point that Councillor Munkoff-Swain just made around the Chief Medical Officer of Health switching the direction to wear masks. So I'll switch on to my second point here, which is back to talking about businesses again. As was stated earlier in the meeting, local businesses just are not going to be able to withstand another shutdown. And it's been very hard for many businesses, I can only assume, and I've heard even to this point, when some of the assistance leaves, we may see some businesses in an even tougher spot. So the outcome of the last meeting, we had unanimous consent at this table for putting a letter forward to the province, indicating the desire for the province to make a decision, on mask, and that letter went out. And one of the things that we said in that letter was that we wanted to see a consistent approach, and a consistent approach done for everyone to bank on that decision and use that decision. So this council voted unanimously to send that letter because we all acknowledge that the consistency was required. So tonight this council has an opportunity. So we couldn't control that. The province, we're asking the province to do that. That's what that letter said. So this council does have the opportunity tonight to provide consistency, because it's our authority for the businesses in the community. So where we were concerned that the province wasn't providing the consistency, and we all agreed that was an issue, tonight we have the ability to do that in our own community because we can make that decision. So for me, when you look at the RFD and the recommendation that was put forward, a vote supporting that supports the consistency in Beaumont that we were looking for from the province, if that makes sense. we have the ability to give that consistency to businesses so that coming in and out of businesses, there's a way to do that, and that way would be using a face covering. When my concern remains that when and if we weren't consistent with that, that there may be business repercussions and lists of businesses that may support or may not support, and social media campaigns taken out against businesses. I've seen some alarming things that happen in social media, and I don't want our businesses to have to deal with that. We have the opportunity to put a bylaw through here tonight that would provide consistency for businesses, the same consistency that we asked the province to give us. We have the power to do that, and supporting this bylaw would do that. So that's all I have to say on that subject for now. Thank you.
Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Stout. You gotta, Councillor Hendricks froze. Councillor.
Am I back?
Here, we got you back.
Thank you. Just back to my basic point. We've had a lot of people ask me and sending us all emails, why are we doing this? I'm looking just for that answer so that we can backstop why we're about to do this. The generalities don't really cut it. I think you have to say why, and why Beaumont has decided to go this route. We have people in the region that have gone in fragmented routes. I don't want to have to back up an answer by saying, well, because Edmonton did it, we needed to do it. That's not the answer. So what is our trigger? Why are we doing it today? Because a week ago, this wasn't before us, right? So what has caused this to happen, and why are we here today? And what's the trigger? So that at least we got that answer. And then we're not given a real solid exit approach either. Okay. But we got to at least give people a reason why we're going in. Is it to bend the curve? Is it some of the other things you hear in the media? Is it statistically an issue in Beaumont? Have we hit a hot spot? Are businesses going to fail if we don't proceed? What is our reason? I like to hear what our reason is. What's going to trigger a mandatory mask bylaw?
Councillor Stout, comments? And I'd like to hear some comments on Councillor Hendricks' question too.
Yes, certainly. All right, this is a tough one for me because I've gone both ways and looked at it from as many sides as I can think of and talked to as many people as possible about it and heard a lot of different opinions. For me, I like everybody else, I'm going to deplore the lack of leadership from the province on this when their own chief medical officer is recommending a practice, but however, it's left to the municipal or to other levels of government to actually implement anything along those recommendations. I think it's deplorable, but that's the state we're in. And that means I think that we have a duty of care as a municipality, as municipal leaders, as public figures at least in our municipality, a duty of care that says we don't allow our residents to come to harm that we can reasonably foresee through inaction. And we've got a clear recommendation from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and that, Councillor Hendricks, I believe, is what's changed in the last, certainly in the last month or so. We've got a clear recommendation that yes, mask wearing under certain circumstances, for instance, in indoors, in close proximity where a 2-meter social distancing rule can't always be observed. And I'd argue that certainly applies to transit and probably to a lot of public places as well. Then a face covering may prevent the spread of the virus. So that's where we are. And I think consequently, knowing that, we have a duty to do something about it.
And I'm going to expound on that a little bit then, because sort of the way I'm thinking here, Dr. Hinshaw is still not mandating it. She has said it's a strongly recommended practice. The public health guidance are keeping the guidelines low. I would suggest that with her mandating masks in schools, where it's going to be hard for those students to socially distance, that it's probably a prudent measure to mandate it in schools. Whereas in local businesses and in public places, when we have more space and we can take other public health measures, which have been successful to date, people can do their social distancing. They can do that. I don't think. I'm still looking for what's changed and what the trigger is. So moving on to, unless you had another comment, Councillor, follow up.
Do you want me to answer that? Yeah, actually, I'd go the other way. I'd say that what's changed has been the scientific evidence. There's more evidence to support that mask wearing prevents transmission, because the mechanisms of transmission weren't originally clear, and there's also evidence suggesting that mask wearing does not have the harmful effects that early on were supposed, or longer ago were supposed. But yeah, we've also had the comments that none of us here are medical experts. We don't have a Beaumont Chief Medical Officer of Health or a Beaumont Health Services to advise us. So we really have to go by the best evidence from the province.
And to that end, this council, right from the beginning of this measure, has stood on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health. And while she has come out and recommended it, she has not made it mandatory. She's made it mandatory in schools. And
yes.
So if we're going to stick on that one, then we should be following her guidelines.
So it's a strong recommendation, which is what I mean by a duty of care, is that if we stand by and say, okay, well, we recommend this, but we're not actually going to do anything to enforce it or to make it happen, then we're not doing our due diligence, in my view.
Okay. Councillor Monkhouse-Swain.
Yeah, I'll take the opportunity to answer a fair question from Councillor Hendricks. Why? Councillor Stout mentioned it because the top medical doctor says so. I agree with the strong recommendation where physical distance isn't achievable. I would challenge that whether you're in a school hallway or you're in the hallway in a lineup between home hardware. You certainly can't socially distance there. And so what we're trying to get here is consistency. So I'm actually going to quote back the report. Page 5 of it says why are we doing this? Well, wearing a face covering is an effective, proactive way to limit the spread of COVID-19, which is clearly one of the biggest, largest pandemics that we've faced here. Second point, mandatory face coverings can help prevent the spread of infection from individuals who are asymptomatic or undiagnosed, right? That's why. Another point, face coverings help protect those who serve the public in our community. So you saw the numbers, 78% of businesses from our own survey, where we actually spoke to them on the phone, they want this, right? And it protects their employees. They will feel a lot safer when people walk into their stores, is what they're telling us, right? Not my interpretation. This is the feedback we've got. Next point, mandatory face coverings in all public spaces rather than certain public places improves consistency. Councillor Van Newkirk mentioned this. People don't want to have to figure out a handbook, not alone from going from Beaumont down to Calgary to figure out which municipality you're in and what you got to do. Imagine having to do that in Beaumont, try to figure out where you got to go there. So consistency is key. I think the last point, we can do this we should be doing this to avoid the need to reintroduce public lockdown measures. Obviously, it's critical to the economy. Again, Councillor Van Newkirk touched on this. I don't want to be, if we take too cautious an approach, ultimately, there's an economic shutdown. One of the things that may have, not necessarily will, but may have helped would have been masks. So I'm not prepared to put our already fragile economy and businesses at risk. The school closures, if there's community spread here, active cases arise, right? It'll force the school board to take a look at that and prevent and potentially introduce school closures, which then triggers a whole bunch of other issues with the economy. So ultimately, those are my points to answer Councillor Hendrick's question, read right off the report. What I've heard, a lot of people being concerned about masks, but what I haven't heard is any reason why not. I do take the point here about members of the public not feeling comfortable wearing the masks, the need to disclose medical conditions. I totally appreciate that, and that we should have a discussion on that. But it just seems a pretty straightforward issue that when you can't physically and socially distance from someone, you should be wearing a mask. And I think that's our right, our job, as councillors, as Councillor Stout pointed, protect the public. And that's why I think we need to do this. The last thing I'll say is earlier on, they didn't come forward, and as again part of the report, they didn't come forward to mandate masks because they were trying to keep the stock of masks for the medical professionals and first responders who needed them first. And now that we've caught up with that, that's why the recommendations have come to strongly recommend wearing masks. So those are a few points to answer Councillor Hendrick's question from my perspective.
Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. And to Councillor Hendrick's question, it's a complex question and I can't answer it with a simple answer. But for me, I think the three considerations are, I'd rather be err on the side of caution, given all that we know and don't know. I think the fact that schools are reopening and we need to set a good example and why we think it's important, we should be doing it, not just expect our children to do it. And I think the third reason would be, for me, consistency in the region. It's not because Edmonton and St. Albert and maybe Strathcona County are doing it, but it's because as a region, we're all going to be affected. If one of our regions becomes more infected than the others, we're all going to be infected. So I think being consistent, as I think it's Councillor Van Newkirk made the point around we wanted leadership from the province. I think we have leadership in our region. So I know not everyone is on that same page, but that's where my head is at right now. And I think it's important to move ahead on this.
Well, if we're looking for consistency in what the region's done, the only two municipalities that have currently, to my knowledge, and Admin can correct me if I go wrong here, that have put in the mandatory masking bylaws are St. Albert and Edmonton. Fort Saskatchewan, Strathcona County, Spruce Grove have all put in trigger points, and that seems to be the centering the discussion around the other discussions that are going on. But Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, thank you. I won't take the time to reiterate the points made by Councillor Moncoswin and Councillor Barnhart, but I'll switch to, or I'll jump to the end of what I was going to say, which was the practicality and the practical examples of what I've seen and what I've felt. So I can't, I'll start off by saying that I really think long and hard before I go out and go shopping and go browsing, and my trips are way more pointed than they used to be. In and out, and really consider, do I need to go in here or not? But even when I have made the decision to go into a business with a mask on, which fogs up my glasses the same way it does every other person who wears glasses, it's tough. I can't remember a time when someone hasn't come within 2 meters of me, whether it was an aisle, whether it was a hallway, whether it was a lineup. So that's one answer to the question that was posed. On schools coming back in, our societal contact is going to be coming from a crawl to a run in a matter of a few days once school comes in. The amount of, I always count on getting sick between September and October because the kids are coming back from school with so many germs. And we're going to experience that all again, and we're going to experience it with the unknown of COVID. Councillor Stout talked about the math. Thank you for doing the math, Councillor Stout, around that 17% unknowing, and how many are walking infected right now. And then there's the whole do as I say, not as I do. I also understand that the province has mandated from 4 to 12 that masks are going to be in there. The answer to the question from my son when he says, "Dad, I have to wear a mask at school all day. Why don't I have to wear a mask in the lineup at Sobeys when this lady's rubbing her cart up beside me?" Well, that's a tough one to answer. So, in summary, I can't remember when people haven't been close. I can't, or I wear a mask and it fogs up just the same as everyone else. And most importantly for me right now, what has changed and what is going to change is the societal contact going from a crawl to a run with kids returning to school. So that's the practical response I would have. Thank you.
Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Thank you, Council. I share frustration with my fellow councillors. I mentioned previously, the provincial government has not really given us the definitive direction on this, and hence here we are here. So I find it very frustrating and very, very angry at the fact that we're in this position that I find to be more of a judgment call than a straight out decision-making process. Here on council, our job is to look at various things like bylaws and subdivisions and stop signs and that sort of thing, rec centers, and make decisions on empirical data that's quantifiable. And we make a decision based on that. And this is everything except that. This is not quantifiable in any way or form. And I find it to be much more of a judgment call than an actual call based a decision to be based on actual facts. So I find it very frustrating. I do find interesting that a number of people did contact the council about with their opinions on this matter for or against wearing masks. What I did find interesting is that those who oppose wearing masks didn't reach out to us that much after we had to cancel all of our city events this year. Council Hendricks committee talked about doing the Beaumont Days back in June, got postponed in September, and we had to cancel outright, as you know, but there wasn't a lot of pushback saying it's our right to have a party, it's our right to go to a midway, it's our right to have a parade. I find the opposition to the mask thing really talk about individual rights, and that becomes more a judgment call for us, not an actual factual call. So I find that part frustrating. I find this whole debate the most frustrating experience so far being on the council with you, my colleagues, is to make a decision on this point. But I do believe people want two things in their government, municipality and provincial, that is consistency and clarity. And with what's happening in the region right now, this is being forced upon us to make a decision. And I think clarity and consistency of what our people want. As Councilor Hendricks mentioned, it's a playbook going from place to place. You need to be consistent, and having masks only in the city properties in my first position. The more I think about it here and the more I listen to empirical data and feedback from citizens in the city, we need to make it go one step further and be proactive. I'm very worried about our business community. They can't take another hit. They really can't. And we are very much a business deprived area right now in our municipality. We're heavily on municipal taxes as opposed to business. We can't afford to have more businesses closed. And I'm worried about a second pandemic. Every time I go to business in Beaumont, they're all wearing masks. I think people should be wearing masks as well. And I debated on my mind which way to go on this issue. As I sat down at this desk to having this discussion, I'm leaning towards supporting the bylaw, which I believe is attachment 2 on page, just to clarify, page 15. That's the bylaw we're looking at with the red changes to it. I do think it's important to protect our citizens, and this bylaw does provide consistency and clarity to our citizens. So thank you very much.
Councilor Hendricks.
Yeah, thank you. And certainly I just want to put a bow on the whole conversation about why and why not. Part of what happened in the last several days is we've been absolutely inundated emails, inundated with comments and a lot of personal interaction with people regarding this issue. And the number one comment that I felt mainly from the negative side is why. And so I'm very happy that today we spent some time explaining why and explaining the frustration of how we got to why. And we've been consistent with having sent a letter to the province saying, hey, we're not happy that you didn't take the moment. You should have taken this moment and run with it and provide us with the leadership. You didn't. That's unfortunate. But now we've gotten from all councillors and our mayor the why. And then now the question is the exit. And I think I'm hearing the same entrance as the exit. We have Dr. Dina Henshaw, who's providing this very strong recommendation to go in. And no doubt we'll wait until she tells us that that strong recommendation is no longer a requirement. I think that's the exit. So, thank you.
Good point.
I see no other hands raised to speak. Councillor Danluck.
Sorry, Mayor Stewart, if you would indulge me, please. My understanding, as I mentioned in my comments a moment ago, that the proposed motion right now is attachment 2 on page 15. Is that correct, that we're voting on attachment 2?
No, well,
just
yes,
to clarify.
yes and no, and correct me if I'm wrong, but attachment 1 is the clean copy. Attachment 2 was the changes that were made from first reading that gave us attachment 1.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to get that clarified. Thank you very much.
So,
thank you.
I see no further requests to speak. I thank council for the debate this evening. It's been a really good debate, and it's unfortunate that we had to have it. And now we have to do what's in the best interest of what we feel is in the vote is how we feel is in the best interest of our community. So at this point, I will call the vote on second reading for bylaw 984-20 temporary face coverings, option 4 as written. All those in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Carries unanimously. Is there a member of council willing to move third reading, or should we have a discussion surrounding whether or not we should send this to the province for review and get their blessing? Councillor Danluck.
Mayor Stewart, could you just explain to me, if you wouldn't mind, and the council and listeners, the procedure here? So we've done second reading now, which is fine. So we have the ability on your suggestion to send this bylaw as passed to the province for a review or final say before we do third reading. Is that what you're suggesting? I think that's interesting. I'm going to explore that.
Yeah, we don't have to do third reading tonight. We've always stood on the fact that public health, that we should be following public health guidelines. And honestly, this is something that none of the rest of our council colleagues have done. So we could send it off to and get their blessing or no as to whether or not this is a good thing. And then we'll actually have the guidance that we need from the CMOH's department and public health to make sure that this is something they want us to be doing. So I'd be interested to have that debate, but if council wishes to move to third reading, we can move to third reading. Councillor Mungaswain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So personally, I'd like to pass this tonight and get it in effect into the community. I don't mind the option at all. Nothing's preventing us once we pass it from sharing it with them and getting their feedback. And if they come back and say, actually, you're overreached here and you actually don't need to do this, then we've got our trigger. We've got the data. So I'd like to pass it tonight. I'd hate to delay this again even more. But I'm not opposed to sending it off to them as a cursory review. So those would be my comments.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And similarly, it's to me, it's well past its time. We should be passing it as soon as possible. I don't think there's anything wrong with us passing third reading and letting them know about it. I also think I'd rather be asking, not even thinking that we really would, but I don't think we need their permission. I know we don't need their permission. I think we should take leadership and do this.
Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Stout.
Yeah, thank you. Just to echo the comments of the other two, I think I do like the idea of the passing it on for review. And I think we can still do that after a third reading, and it would still have the same effect. This is my 2 cents and where I'm at on it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I think I'd concur with the previous two councillors as well. But what would be the benefit of sending it to the province before third reading? What do you hope to achieve?
Well, because I got to be honest, I'm still struggling with this. I mean, I know I voted in favor of second reading, but I'm still struggling with whether or not this is something that we should be doing. it's the, I know she's given a strong recommendation. Like, we really should be following the province's guidelines, and we don't have a large case count. So we don't have a lot of time. We don't have to rush to do this. I mean, it's really low. If we can get it done before school starts, that'd be great. But we send it off, get it reviewed. We get the blessing back from public health, and now I got a leg to stand on. Public health has blessed it. Right now, we're just guessing based on information we've received through briefings and other things. And that's why I'd like to send it before we do third reading. So I probably won't support third reading tonight just for that reason, because I'm not sure we're in our lane. So we can go from there. I know the province has said that we can put these bylaws in place, but for me, it's kind of a thing. Councillor Hendricks.
Yeah, I would hope that we'll find our way to the province with this document one way or the other. I think it would also send a signal to them that, and if other municipalities would follow suit, it would send a signal that we're all struggling with this issue, a provincial matter, and we'd like to have somebody have our back on this decision. So I would hope that in this process, however the numbers play out, that at some point, either before third or after third, we do send it to the province. I can't see why we wouldn't, given that we're relying on them and Dr. Dean Henshaw.
Councillor Ronkoff Swain, followed by Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. I guess my question back to you, and I hope we could get you to yes, but my question back to you would be, what makes you think that they would give any other advice if they're not willing to provide it on a provincial level? What makes you think that they're going to all of a sudden look at it? Okay, Beaumont, this case, actually no, we're going to weigh in here, right? They're going to come back and provide the same advice that the province has been giving, which is, municipalities have got to make this call. So I'm just curious on why you think that they would take an interest in Beaumont and give us the clear direction that we're looking for, if they're not prepared to do it from a provincial perspective.
Because when other industries and other people have asked for specific guidelines, they've provided that. And our ask is about our specific situation. We're not asking for provincial guidelines to help us make this decision. We're asking for guidance on our specific situation. And so I'm hoping that they would take an interest. If they pass us back the same answers, well, then I got something to think about. But I'd really like the feedback on our specific situation from public health.
I would be pleasantly surprised if they gave us direct feedback and said, yeah, Beaumont, you're doing the right thing, or no, you're doing the wrong thing. I don't think you're going to get what you're looking for. I'd be pleasantly surprised. What I would, though, encourage, again, to my original point, is let's make sure we are on the side of caution here. Let's get the bylaw passed tonight, so that we're in there, and then we'll seek their feedback. And if they come back, worst case scenario, we've had mandatory masks in place for a couple of weeks. And if they come back and say, actually, you don't need to do that, then we can rescind it. But I'd rather that than have this going around, as Councillor Van Newkirk mentioned, we're going from a run to a walk, or crawl to a run, or whatever the analogy was. With schools opening up, I'd rather have this bylaw in place instead of waiting for the Alberta Health to get back to us.
Oh, I see Councillor Van Newkirk dropped. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I would agree with moving to third reading this evening, to do exactly what I mentioned earlier, and other people mentioned that we want to give our citizens clarity and consistency. And I think waiting after tonight would only muddy the waters further for our citizens. I'd like to avoid that, but I do think we should reach out to the province, as you suggested, and see what the province tells us once they see our bylaw. And as Councillor Hendricks mentioned, we get their attention with a letter saying we're taking leadership here. What are you doing provincially as well? And so that takes us. But I would prefer not to delay this evening on third reading based on what we've already done, and need to provide our citizens with clarity and consistency. Thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no further requests to speak, is there a member of council willing to move third reading?
I will move third reading.
Councillor Stout, so moved. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, debate upon the motion.
I would like some debate on it, yes.
Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor. Actually, Councillor Stout, you made the motion. You get to speak to your motion, followed by Councillor Hendricks.
Well, I've listed all the reasons why I'm in favour of it. It's I don't think I need to reiterate. I have two concerns with it as it's currently formed. One is we've already discussed the size of the fine. I'm not sure that $50 is the right amount. I'd be quite happy with it being a lower amount, as this is not intended to be punitive. It is intended to be educational, as far as I'm aware, as far as we have discussed. And similarly, I can't imagine this would become the case, but I certainly don't want this to become a source of revenue, or more importantly, even that it is perceived as being so. So I'd like to suggest that we set the fine at a lower amount to be done. Not sure what that amount is, mind you. So let's say, what's the lowest denomination note in common circulation? $5. Let's make the fine a $5 fine. I'd like to propose. And secondly, I'm also curious as to why the age cutoff is 2 years of age. Why under 2 you don't have to wear a mask, over 2 you do, but that does not seem consistent with, first of all, some of the municipalities. In fact, it's 5, including some in the package, and 5 years of age. And of course, at schools, it's grade 4, which I'm reliably informed is 8 years old. So I'm curious to know as well how we arrived at 2 and whether that's the right number. Certainly, I think it was Banff had a description about how it was 2 years old unless you had a 5-year-old who wouldn't put a mask on. It wasn't quite worded that way, but that's what it meant.
Okay. We're gonna carve that into 2 parts. One is, and I'll deal with the second one first. The question on number 2 would have been appropriate to be asked when we're doing questions, because right now we're into debate.
Yes.
And so I don't know if we're going to be able to ask that question or if I'm going to allow that question. But you're going to have to propose an amendment, and then we can go get some extra advice. On your first one, if you want to move that fine to $5, you're going to have to propose an amendment, and we will debate the amendment as members of council and go from there.
Okay, I'll propose an amendment that we make the fine $5.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor to change the fine to $5. We're going to talk about this amendment, and then we'll move forward. Councillor Van Newkirk, I see your hand in the air.
Yeah, thank you. I guess what I would say to that amendment is we've had a very robust and serious and good discussion here tonight, and got to a point where we were able to get through second reading and get to the point where we're going to talk about third. And I don't know that there's a huge value in debating a potential $45 spread between $5 and $50, being a hang up in a half an hour discussion. So respectfully for me, I wouldn't support a $5 instead of $50 amendment, because I think we're into the minutia here. The important part of the discussion was had. We got there. We had a good chat, and let's get this done. Thank you.
I see almost everybody's hand still up. So is everybody's hand still up, want to talk to the amendment, or we want to talk about other things?
Amendment.
If your hand's still up, we're going to talk to the amendment. Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Monkhouse-Swain.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. I agree with Councillor Van Newkirk. Respectfully, Councillor Stout, I'm fine with the level of $50. With our educational approach to this bylaw as opposed to enforcement, I'm fine with the 50. Thank you very much.
Councillor Monkhouse-Swain.
Yeah, support the others. What I would say, and I don't think it needs to be in the bylaw, but something that administration could look at is, we talked about this not wanting to be punitive, not wanting it to be a money making, certainly. What we could look at is that money that is collected potentially, if we do end up levying some of these fines, could be used to actually purchase masks and provide them to businesses across the community to help when people do forget their masks. I've seen that in businesses where if you've forgotten it, you can pick it up. So just a way to directly put that back into the community. So no adjustment to the bylaw needed on that, but just something for administration to consider. But yeah, I support the motion, the $50 as it was originally set forth.
No worries. Seeing no further hands to speak. All those in favor of changing the fine to $5, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Hey.
The amendment is defeated 6-1. Councillor Stout, did you wish to make another further amendment surrounding the age of 2 in the exemptions?
So I'm still muted. We should have done this in the discussion. I'm not sure what the age should be. I'd certainly suggest that 5 would be more appropriate than 2, however. So yeah, let's go there.
Everybody else with me?
Yeah, he froze.
Hopefully he comes back. Well, while we're waiting for Councillor Stout to reboot, we'll move to Councillor Barnhart. Oh, you're back. So you're proposing an amendment. Councillor Stout's frozen again.
Can you hear me?
You can now.
Sorry about that. Yes, I propose that we amend the minimum age for mandatory mask
to
wearing from 2 years of age to 5 years of age, which I think is more consistent. 2? You can't hear me, can you?
Not really, no.
We got it. You want to move to 5 years old?
Yeah. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I picked that up as well, and I believe it's in the town of Banff's bylaw that they have in place. And the wording that they had, and I was just trying to find it. I'm not going to find it fast enough, I don't think. But it does speak to the fact that it allows parents who are having difficulty getting children under the age of, well, it says 5 in there, but maybe we're going to have to look at something beyond that for those that might be homeschooled. But to give some leeway to the parents who are having difficulty getting their children to wear the mask, because I wouldn't want to see the fine be given to parents who are really trying, but they're having difficulty getting their kids to do something in the middle of Sobeys or something like that. So I don't know what the wording exactly could be and whether we can do this on the fly here. We could find it in the Banff wording if you want and suggest that.
This is our last chance to make an amendment to the bylaw before we vote on third reading. So.
Okay, well, if you give me a minute, I'll find it.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record here in that we've had a robust discussion tonight to get to this point, and administration did their homework and did their research when they put this forward. I'm going to guess that if they were to answer, it would be a consistent approach across the region, and not needing to have the exception appendix in the handbook for Beaumont around that. And then I'll also lean on the fact that discretion on enforcement is what we've heard consistently all night from Director Cook, from Director Mackin, from Ms. Broom, from administration. So I am comfortable leaving the age as presented in the bylaw and leaning on the education and discretion piece that we've heard loud and clear tonight from administration. In the same breath, I hear what you're saying, Councillor Stout and Councillor Barnhart. I do, but I think that administration has the enforcement tools they need and education tools they need to make good on, the worries or concerns that you might be bringing forward. So I would not support moving the age at this point. Thank you.
Councillor Barnhart, did you find the wording you were looking for?
Yes, and it's in a child who is young, thank you, Councillor Stout, a child who is younger than 2 years of age, a child who is under 5, chronologically or developmentally, and who refuses to wear a mask and cannot be persuaded to do so by their caregiver. I thought that was kind of brilliant the way they worded that. But I also, I hear you, Councillor Van Newkirk, but I do think, as the mayor has stated, this is our one chance to kind of get this right as best as we can at this point in time. So I would support that amendment Councillor Stout's made.
Councillor Hendricks?
I would ask our administration for a comment, and hopefully there's some tie to Dr. Dina Henshaw and her recommendations for this.
Admin?
Thank you, Your Worship. One part of the bylaw that I would just highlight is the exceptions, which is section 5. it says that it doesn't apply to persons under 2 years of age or persons with an underlying medical condition. Hold on, there's another one. Or persons who are unable to place, use, or remove a face covering safely without assistance. So, I mean, it could be argued that a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old who's messing around with the mask, like there's leeway in there. I did find, if you're asking where it came from, the 2 years of age, it came from the research of other municipalities and consistencies. So you've got it in Edmonton, you've got it in Calgary. That's the age that they've gone with.
Hendricks?
So do we know what Dr. Dina Henshaw recommends?
That's fine. That I don't know. Hold on, let me message Kendrick.
Give admin a chance. Yep.
Here, I've got the wording here from the COVID website.
Sure. What do you got?
Yeah, so from the mask portion of the website, they do refer when not to use a mask to children under 2 years of age. And, you know, that's where I've seen the 2 years referenced. So just what I could recall, I found there. So maybe admin can find more.
Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, if I could also add, the advocacy groups that we researched also recommended 2 years of age.
Thank you. Does that satisfy the answer to the questions?
Yes.
Just that, could we just clarify who those advocacy groups are?
Through your worship to Councillor Stout, one of them is called Masks for All, and that's a national organization.
Okay. Further discussion on the motion. Councillor Hendricks?
Worship, I just wanted to make sure that we're still going to move ahead with a letter, an ask to the province.
That'll be a motion that comes after third reading here. Right now, we're just working on the amendment proposed by Councillor Stout.
Okay, that's fair.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Councillor Margot Swain.
I just want to be crystal clear.
So, the corner of my eye. So
yeah. So we the motion on the table is to move it to 5, right?
That's the vote right now. Change 2 to 5.
Thank
you. Mayor, if I may.
I
was suggesting we adopt the wording similar to the town of Banff, not just to change the year to 5.
Councillor Stout, would you adopt that as a friendly amendment to your motion?
Oh, yes, I will.
Okay, so Councillor Stout's amendment that we're now voting on is to change the wording from section 4 does not apply to a persons under 2 years of age to a child who is younger than 2 years of age or a child who is under 5 years of age chronologically or developmentally and who refuses to wear a mask and cannot be persuaded to do so by a caregiver. Is the motion in front of us. All those in favor? I don't see any. All those in favor, wave your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Councillor Van Newkirk appears to be frozen. 6. All those against? Councillor Van Newkirk, I don't know which way you went there. Is he frozen for everybody but me?
He's frozen.
He's frozen.
Everything but his eyes. There we go.
Yeah, Mayor, sorry, my connection froze there for a second. I missed that. I'm sorry.
No worries. Okay, we're just in the middle of the vote. Did you hear the friendly amendment from Councillor Barnard to Councillor Stout?
Yes, and then I didn't see the process that was gone through there. Sorry, it just everybody froze.
Yeah, no worries. Called for all those in favor, at which point 6 of us raised our hands in favor, and then you froze, and you froze again.
Yeah, okay, so
Are you in favor or
Count-
opposed?
in favor.
Okay, that carries unanimously. Which brings us back to third reading, which is on the table. Further debate on the motion for third reading. Councillor Danluck.
Thank you, Your Worship. This whole procedure, this morning I went down to McDonald's about 7:30 and spent about an hour talking to people there about this whole issue, and they're all in favor of the city properties, and they were guardedly in favor of right across the city, as we've done with our bylaw here so far. So most people, I think, are going to be very happy with this. There'll be some who aren't unhappy, of course, but I do think this is in the best interest of Beaumont in the bigger picture, protecting our businesses, protecting our citizens, and providing clarity and consistency so people know in Beaumont what to expect. And I think it's going to be to our long-term interest in our community. Thank you very much.
Very much. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, raise your hand.
In
Aye.
favor.
Aye.
Favor.
One. All right. And that, thank you very much for the very robust debate. One more motion. I will move that we send our bylaw to public health for review and comment. To go from there. Discussion on the motion? Or further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Which brings us to the end of a long 2 hours almost. So thank you very much. It was a very emotional debate. And the best, Councillor Stout. 2 seconds before I call a break.
Yeah, what was the actual count on the vote of third reading?
Third reading, 6-1. I think we should have waited, but
Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Thank you for clarifying.
yeah. So with that in mind, we will take a break. Take 5, be back, and then hopefully we can get through the last couple of items. Reconvene the meeting of Monday, August the 10th, which brings us to item 4A, correspondence that we received from the mayor of Leduc County. I'll let administration introduce it and then I will speak. I remember admin going to introduce this, or did you just want me to go?
Thank you, Your Worship. It might be quicker if you just go because I'm trying to pull it up on my computer here. So
Great.
thank you.
We received a letter from the mayor. I assume I'm going to go from the assumption that everybody's read the letter and is aware of what's going on with the assessment models in terms of oil and gas within this province. And Mayor DeBlanco, on behalf of Leduc County, has requested that we put in a letter of support. This is the assessment model reviews are something that are going to have a major impact to our rural colleagues and our rural municipalities. And while this particular item does not affect Beaumont, I think we have zero assessment. I think it would be a good motive on our part to throw in a quick letter of support for Leduc County, suggesting that the province work with our rural colleagues to come to a fair and equitable resolution to this issue that they seem to be having. So I will move that we write the letter on behalf of City of Beaumont in support of the County of Leduc and open it up for debate and questions from members of council. Councillor Moncalf-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So I just want to be clear though, what you're actually asking of us. So Mayor DeBlanco is asking for a letter of support or asking for support. So there's a difference between asking for a letter of support to reconsider these changes and work with municipalities to better understand their impact. Because I get the second part of things, work with municipalities to better understand the impacts, but MLAs to reconsider the changes without knowing what that it is from a municipality perspective, I don't support that. I personally have spoken to AUMA publicly about this on several occasions, about the disproportion of how linear taxes get assessed, and how the counties, and I'll try not to go on too much of a tirade here, but essentially pipelines and linear assessment, as you know, goes traditionally through rural counties. They're the ones who get the linear tax assessment. And from an urban perspective, they're the ones who have to often foot the bill. So as an example, a new pipeline or that comes in through a neighboring county, the majority of the work is they go in and they drive on the city roads, they stay in city spots, they use the city facilities. And right now, the urban municipalities don't get a cent from those linear taxes, even though the impact goes to the urban municipalities. So I think this review is long overdue, actually. I support better communication and a discussion with municipalities, absolutely, about the impacts, but to blindly just support the county, I'm not in favor of, because I think urbans actually get a very raw deal. Strathcona County is a different scenario, but I'll use City of Grand Prairie and the County of Grand Prairie as a prime example, where there is a multitude of pipelines that go in and around the county, and the county gets those linear tax dollars. The city doesn't get a cent. Yet the City of Grand Prairie is the ones who have to foot the bill for all those workers coming into the city, driving on the roads, using their rec facilities, etc. So I think it is fair for the province, and I urge the previous government to do this. So I'm happy that the new one is looking at it. I haven't seen any more details than what's in this letter, so I'll be hesitant to support a too strongly worded letter, I guess, for lack of a better term. But I do think we need to have better communication for sure. But I do think the issue absolutely needs to be addressed, because a lot of urban municipalities are footing the bill, and a lot of rural counties, and not saying Leduc County is, but a lot of rural counties in our province are getting disproportionately wealthier on linear tax than the urban folks. So those are my comments on that.
Yeah, no, and just to clarify, I'm not asking, I don't think we should be sending a letter asking them to reconsider their changes. I'm thinking the letter of support is to encourage them to work with municipalities so that they better understand the changes and they come to a consensus that works for everybody, not necessarily reconsider what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a nice neighborly thing to do, and I support that. I just want to be clear, because on the letter it says ask them to reconsider the changes and talk better. So if the motion comes forward that we send a letter to encourage MLAs to work better with all municipalities to come to an agreeable solution, more than happy to do that. But I don't think we want to be, because I think we'll be very offside with a lot of our urban friends across the province as well. So let's get some communication. Let's find out what this is. It should be a discussion with AUMA and RMA. Yeah, so if that's the motion, I'm good with it. But I just wanted to be clear on the background around this.
Yeah, I apologize. I should have been more clear on the motion, but yeah, that's the motion. We don't have a stake in this fight, or we have a small stake in this, but we're here to support communication and working with the municipalities. We're not here to derail the process. Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Stout.
Yeah, thank you. As Councillor Stouts, or as Councillor Munkhoff-Swain said, it is a very complex issue. I'm happy to support the motion as you presented it, Mayor, around the second half, the communication piece, to better understand the impact and whatnot. Personally, I did reach out to our MLA and have a chat with them about this, with my concerns around timing and the level of communication. And so those are the things I spoke with him about. He recognized that there was a complex issue, and was committed to continuing that conversation and bringing that forward. So there may be cause to loop the MLA in at some point to the discussions for to gain further support in the region. On top of this, I don't know what the best mechanism for that is, but happy to support the motion as you put forward to around the communication piece. Thank you.
Councillor Stout. Thank you very much, Councillor Newkirk. Councillor Stout.
Oops, I'm sorry. Yes, I just want to be absolutely clear. We're not asking the provincial government to reconsider the changes. We're just asking that they communicate them better and
Yeah,
discuss the implications.
yeah,
with-
communicate and work with your municipalities.
Okay, yeah, then I'd be in favor of that. I think we'd have to think long and hard before we said, I'll reverse what you've already decided.
Yeah.
Right. Seeing no further requests to speak, call the vote. All those in favor of the letter, raise your hands and say aye.
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 That carries unanimously. At this point, we have a closed session, one item, but two separate items within that one item to discuss. Can I get a motion to move into closed session? Councilor Daniluk, you're in.
Your worship, thank you.
All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 All right, so we just completed the closed session. There are no motions arising from the information presented during the closed session. So all that's left is to say thank you very much to my fellow colleagues on council. I really appreciated all your input tonight, and especially in the mask debate. It was it was an emotional decision, and hopefully we made the right one. I appreciate all you guys, and we'll see you at the next meeting. And we are adjourned for the evening. Thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.